I'm Sarah Jensen, and for years, I thought I had built the perfect life. A quiet coastal town, a job I loved at the library, and a husband who once promised to choose me every single day. But everything began to unravel the moment his mother moved in. Subtle corrections turned into quiet control. My home became hers, and I became invisible. Then one night, after a single whispered lie, my husband did something I never imagined he was capable of. I should have walked away right then, but I had just found out I was pregnant, with the child I swore I would protect at all costs. That was the moment I stopped surviving and started fighting back. Before I share the full story, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and if you've ever had to reclaim your voice in a world that tried to silence it. You're not alone, and my story might be the one you need to hear today. I used to live in a small, quiet coastal town in Oregon. Think misty mornings, the kind where the fog hangs low over the ocean, and every cafe has that comforting, warm smell of cinnamon and freshly brewed coffee. My life was peaceful, predictable. I worked at the public library, a sanctuary of stories and quiet contemplation. My days were spent shelving books, organizing story time for the children. Their laughter was the brightest sound in my otherwise serene existence. And then coming home to a comforting stillness. I genuinely thought that was my path. Forever. Until Ethan walked in. It was a crisp October morning, just like any other. At a cafe called the Birch and Bloom, I was in my usual corner, hunched over notes for the library's upcoming reading program. A delicate stack of papers precariously balanced beside my lukewarm tea. Then a sudden collision, a clumsy thud, a cascade of papers flying, and the distinct aroma of spilled coffee. He blurted out, "Oh God, I am so incredibly sorry. I didn't see you. My hands were full." So I looked up and there he was. A man with a slightly messy mop of brown hair, his face a mixture of genuine apology and sheer embarrassment as he scrambled to gather my scattered notes. For some reason, I just laughed. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time in what felt like forever, someone had completely caught me off guard. He looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his hazel eyes, and then a soft invitation. "How can I make it up to you? Can I take you to lunch as an apology for ruining your hard work?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes," I said. And that was it. That was our beginning. Ethan was an architect, a detail-oriented man who paradoxically found beauty in the imperfections of old houses. He had this quirky habit of sketching historical buildings in his worn notebook every weekend, his pencils dancing across the page. He used to call me his iron-hearted librarian after a comical incident where I flat out refused to extend his book loan, even when he showed up with a plate of homemade chocolate chip cookies as a bribe. On our trips to the farmer's market, he'd deliberately pick out the most misshapen, ugliest onions, just to make me burst out laughing. He didn't need grand gestures or carefully planned romantic overtures. His natural warmth, his genuine kindness, and the way he just was, that was what drew me in, what melted my carefully constructed shell. We got married almost a year later, a small ceremony under the towering pine trees behind my house. There weren't many guests, just enough to fill 2 short rows of simple wooden chairs. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. But his hand in mine was so incredibly warm, a steady anchor. I'll never forget where he whispered as he gently placed the ring on my finger, his voice husky with emotion. "I won't promise to be perfect, Sarah, because no one is, but I promise I'll choose you, every single day." Those words, those simple, powerful words, echoed in my heart for a long, long time. After the wedding, we moved into a little house on the edge of town. It was a charming fixer-upper, with a bright red roof and a cozy wooden porch draped in vibrant bougainvillea. We strung up our wedding photos with twine and tiny wooden clothespins, a whimsical display across our living room. We painted the walls a warm cream, planted fragrant lavender in the garden. I loved that lavender, and spent countless weekends baking bread together, the smell of yeast and warmth filling our home. Married life wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was full of small, consistent acts of kindness. He'd bring me coffee in bed every morning, always just the way I liked it. He'd patiently wait for me to get home from the library so we could have candlelit dinners, our conversations drifting softly in the flickering light. Once, when I had a terrible fever, he stayed by my side all night, changing cool towels on my forehead every hour without a single complaint. Another time, I was inconsolable over a heartbreaking book, and he didn't try to fix it or offer empty platitudes. He just wrapped me in his arms, let the silence hold me, and simply was there. I used to think if happiness had a shape, this would be it. A quiet, comforting, utterly safe shape. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that when a third person enters what seems like a perfect, balanced life, things don't fall apart all at once. Oh no, it's far more insidious than that. It starts with little things, subtle, quiet shifts. Like winter slowly sneaking into the house through an unnoticed draft. You don't even realize it's happening until the chill has settled deep into your bones. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan got a call from his mother, Eleanor. I was on the porch, tending to my lavender plants, humming a soft tune. He stepped outside, holding his phone, a conflicted look on his face, his voice quieter than usual. Mom wants to stay with us for a bit, after the divorce. I paused, my watering can hovering midair. How long is a bit? I asked, my stomach already tightening. Ethan glanced at me, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. She said just a few weeks. Her new place in Eugene isn't ready yet. I think it won't be long, Sarah, really. I nodded, trying to appear understanding, even though a knot of unease had already formed in my chest. I wasn't thrilled, not by a long shot, but I understood. After all, she was his mother. Her name was Eleanor Thompson. She was 60, sharp, reserved, and once I learned a respected university lecturer. I'd only met her a handful of times before the wedding, and none of those encounters had lasted more than an hour. Eleanor moved in 3 days later. A sleek black SUV pulled up our driveway. She stepped out in a long, impeccably tailored gray trench coat, her eyes unreadable, pulling her own luggage with a kind of steely control that clearly didn't need assistance. When Ethan opened the door, she gave him a quick, almost perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Then she turned to me. Sarah, she said, her voice smooth but precise. You clearly have a gift for growing lavender, but watering in the late afternoon, that'll rot the roots, you know. My smile felt tight, plastered on. Her very first words to me were a correction. At first, I tried to be gracious. I invited her to dinner, asked about her teaching years, genuinely tried to engage. Her answers were short, polite, punctuated by frequent, almost pointed glances at her watch. But what truly unsettled me wasn't her distance or her chilly demeanor. It was the tiny, quiet changes that began to permeate our home. One morning, I noticed the spice rack had been meticulously rearranged, no longer by frequent use, but alphabetically. My bookshelf in the reading room, which I had carefully organized by color for aesthetic appeal and ease of finding, no longer followed my system. Instead, it was categorized by academic disciplines, perfectly aligned. She'd say, "You're a librarian, Sarah. Surely you understand structure better than anyone." When I washed dishes, she'd stand behind me, a silent, disapproving shadow, then gently note, "Ethan never liked the dishes turned upside down. I always set them face up so the water drains properly." Ethan just chuckled, oblivious, or perhaps unwilling to see the underlying message. "Mom's just trying to help, honey," he'd say, but I began to feel replaced. One tiny, intimate detail at a time. My home was becoming hers, and I was slowly being erased from it. By week 2, the feeling was undeniable. I came home late after a particularly long meeting at the library, bone-tired and ready for the comforting routine of our kitchen. But when I walked in, I found Eleanor already there, wearing my apron. The air was thick with the rich, savory smell of roasted chicken, the very dinner I had planned to make. Ethan was already at the table, beaming, looking utterly content. "Mom made my favorite tonight, Sarah, even pumpkin pie for dessert." I managed a smile, a hollow mask over the cold, sinking feeling in my stomach. That kitchen had been ours, our shared space of laughter and quiet domesticity. Now it felt like a stage, and I was standing off script, an unneeded extra. Eleanor never said anything overtly cruel. She was too subtle, too razor-sharp beneath her velvet exterior. One night, as I prepared stew, she hovered behind me, her voice a low murmur. "Oh, Sarah, no salt first. Ethan's always had a sensitive tongue. Didn't he tell you?" I served the stew, a bit too salty, and waited for Ethan's reaction. He didn't notice. He ate it all seemingly without complaint, and just said, "Maybe next time a little beef broth too." I heard her comment, but I didn't answer. Her suggestions, however, began to carry more weight with him. One morning, I suggested I wanted to rearrange the reading room to work more comfortably. Ethan hesitated. Mom thinks we should keep it as is. She says it looks neater. Or when I asked him what he wanted for dinner over the weekend, he'd reply, I think Mom already planned something. She said not to let you tire yourself out. Not to let me tire myself out. It sounded kind, thoughtful, but I felt pushed to the sidelines of a life I had helped build. A life that was supposed to be ours. One night, while preparing laundry, I found his clothes folded differently. Not my way, not the casual way he used to toss them into the hamper, but precisely, almost militarily. A sticky note sat on top, written in Eleanor's elegant script. Ethan always preferred his shirts folded vertically, easier to find. Mom. That's when it truly hit me. I was no longer allowed to touch the things that once felt intimately mine. Our home, our routines, even his preferences, all were being redefined by her. Ethan became more irritable. He'd ask why I was so quiet lately, told me I'd become moody. He'd say, Mom's only trying to help Sarah. Why are you being so difficult? But I knew, some help isn't help at all. It's control, dressed in concern, a subtle, insidious way of saying she understands him more than I ever could. That night, I lay awake, listening to the ticking clock and the soft click of Eleanor's door closing, and I realized, with a heavy, aching heart, that I was no longer the only woman in my husband's heart. I found out I was pregnant on a Saturday morning while reorganizing children's books in the library's reading room. The wave of nausea came so suddenly, so overwhelmingly, that I had to cling to the shelf to steady myself, my knuckles white. At first, I dismissed it as stress and exhaustion. The past few weeks had been draining, emotionally and physically. But by the third time that week, I was dry heaving before I even had breakfast. I knew something wasn't right. On the way home, I secretly bought a pregnancy test, slipping it into my purse, careful not to let Eleanor see. That night, after the house had gone quiet, after the soft click of Eleanor's door signified she was tucked away, I stepped into the bathroom. My hands trembled, nerves and a desperate, fragile hope warring within me. 2 lines, clear, undeniable. I sank to the cold tile floor, my arms wrapped protectively around my belly, tears blurring my vision. I didn't know if I was crying out of fear for what this would mean, or out of an overwhelming, profound hope for this tiny life. But one thing was certain, this baby was mine, and I wanted to protect it, whether Ethan was still mine or not. In the days that followed, I lived in 2 separate worlds. One weighed down by the physical exhaustion of early pregnancy, the constant nausea, the crushing fatigue, the heightened sense of smell that made everyday odors unbearable. The other world was defined by the silent, chilling distance growing between me and my husband. Ethan no longer held me at night. His hand, once a comforting presence on my hip, lay still and distant beside him. He no longer texted reminders to eat lunch or sent silly emojis to make me smile during a long day. The sweet, thoughtful things he used to say were replaced with cold, vague questions. Why are you in the bathroom so often lately, Sarah? Your eating schedule's been all over the place. Is everything all right? He asked it with a strange detachment, a hint of suspicion in his tone. I knew Eleanor had planted the seeds of doubt in him. She didn't have to say it out loud. Just a suspicious glance when I felt a wave of nausea, a pointed observation about my lack of appetite was enough. One evening, as I walked into the living room, I overheard her whispering on the phone. Her voice was low, conspiratorial, laced with a feigned concern that sent shivers down my spine. She avoids eye contact, Carol. She's definitely hiding something. Ethan, you should be careful. My blood ran cold. I wanted to scream, to burst into the room and tell Ethan about the tiny, miraculous life growing inside me, to tell him I wasn't hiding anything, that I was just searching desperately for the version of him I once trusted. But before I could speak, the silence between us, that terrible, vast silence, filled every space, every unspoken word. It was a silence that had become heavier, more suffocating than any argument. I started writing a journal for the baby in a leather-bound notebook. I used to jot down things I was grateful for. It felt like a secret conversation with the future, a way to pour out my fears and hopes without judgment. Every morning, no matter how tired or disheartened I felt, I wrote one simple line. I'm still here, little one. I'm trying. I clung to the hope that this child, our child, would be the one thing that could bring Ethan back. that could shatter Eleanor's manipulative grip. He used to dream of a home filled with children's laughter. He used to spend hours picking paint colors for a nursery that didn't even exist yet, describing the tiny imaginary occupant with such tenderness. He once said, his voice full of heartfelt longing, "If I have you, Sarah, and a kid running through the yard, that's all I'll ever need. That's my whole world." So I made a plan. A beautiful, gentle evening, enough to remind him why we fell in love in the first place, why we chose each other. I picked Friday, the day Eleanor usually played cards with her friends at a club 10 miles out of town. I woke up early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, to bake baguettes using his favorite recipe, the comforting scent of fresh bread filling the quiet house. I made triple-layer lasagna, a beet salad with lemon honey dressing, just like on our fourth date. Every detail was carefully chosen, a silent plea to remember. I lit candles around the dining table, laid out our embroidered linen napkins, and placed a small, carefully wrapped gift box beside his plate. Inside, nestled among soft tissue paper, was a folded white baby onesie, printed with the simple, poignant words, "Hi, Dad." My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs when I heard Ethan's car pull up in the driveway. I straightened my dress, took a deep, shaky breath, and told myself, "Just look at me like you used to. Just one look, and everything will shift. Everything will be okay." But Eleanor walked in first. Card night had been canceled. "Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with mock concern, "I hope you don't mind if I join you for dinner." I froze, my fingers tightening around the wooden spoon I was holding. I couldn't say no without putting Ethan in an impossible, awkward spot. "Of course not," I managed, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. He walked in right behind her, offering only a casual smile. "Smells amazing, honey. Did you bake the bread?" I nodded. That nod swallowed everything I wanted to say, every desperate plea for connection, because tonight wasn't about pride or about getting what I wanted. It was about a quiet, profound truth growing inside me. Dinner unfolded under the soft, flickering candlelight and Eleanor's ever-watchful, scrutinizing eyes. She asked if I'd used whole wheat flour because Ethan gets bloated easily, as if I didn't know my own husband's dietary quirks. She sampled the salad, then declared it a little tangy, adding with a saccharine smile, "Ethan never liked sharp flavors, did you, dear?" He chuckled along, a sound that felt like a knife twisting in my gut, and I no longer heard the sound of my own heartbeat. It felt like it had flatlined, a silent echo in the increasingly cold room. I cleared the plates, my eyes flicking to the unopened gift box, still sitting innocently beside his napkin. I didn't open it, not tonight. I needed a moment of peace, a breath. I needed to see the man I loved without looking through the haze of his mother's insidious whispers. But fear crept in, a cold, creeping dread that maybe, just maybe, Ethan no longer stood on my side. Maybe he had chosen hers. I don't remember exactly when the atmosphere in my kitchen changed, when the air thickened with an unspoken tension, but I do remember it was the moment I brought out dessert. The clink of spoons against ceramic stopped abruptly. Eleanor stood beside Ethan, resting her hand on his shoulder, leaning in to whisper something I couldn't hear. But I saw his eyes, those warm, kind hazel eyes I once trusted completely, suddenly froze over, sharp as winter ice. Ethan set down his spoon with a clatter and stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly across the polished hardwood floor, a harsh sound in the sudden silence. "Is it true?" he demanded. His voice low and hoarse, staring straight at me, his gaze accusatory. "Is what true, Ethan? What do you mean?" My mind raced, trying to grasp what Eleanor could have said. "What are you hiding from me, Sarah? Don't play dumb." His voice rose, tinged with a frightening fury I had never heard directed at me. Eleanor stepped back, but her gaze never left me. There was no concern in her eyes, just a quiet, chilling satisfaction, as if this entire scene had been rehearsed in her head a dozen times, meticulously crafted. I clutched my napkin, my knuckles white. "I don't know what you're talking about. You think I'm blind, Sarah? You think I haven't noticed you running to the bathroom all week, dry heaving with no explanation, avoiding any kind of touch? You think I'm too stupid to notice something's off?" His tone turned into a shout, his face flushed with anger. I stood up, my eyes stinging, a desperate plea forming on my lips. "I was going to tell you. I just hadn't found the right moment, Ethan." "No, Sarah, you were hiding it. You didn't think I deserved to know. I didn't even have time to speak, to defend myself, before the slap landed. It was sudden, so fast, so unexpected, I couldn't react. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a whip, sharp and brutal. My left cheek burned, a searing, instantaneous fire. I stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the table for support, my legs threatening to give out. My heart felt like it had stopped, a frozen lump in my chest. Ethan, the man who once kissed the tiniest scratch on my hand while gardening, the man who brought me coffee in bed, who swore to choose me every day, had just slapped me. The air shattered, the domestic peace utterly demolished. I didn't cry. There was no room for tears, just a sharp, violent clenching in my stomach. A wave of nausea, more intense than any I'd felt from the pregnancy, surged up my throat. I turned, blindly stumbled to the sink, and threw up so hard it felt like my insides were coming out. Ethan's voice called behind me, laced with a strange mixture of disgust and concern. "Jesus, Sarah, what's wrong with you?" As I collapsed to the floor, my purse slipped off my shoulder. Something small rolled out, hit the table leg with a tiny click, and stopped right at his feet. A pregnancy test, pale pink plastic, 2 clear, unmistakable lines. Ethan bent down slowly, his movements almost robotic. He picked it up. His face went pale, a ghostly white. "Is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I looked up at him, instinctively cradling my belly, as if to protect the fragile life within from the harsh reality of the room. "Yes," I choked out, my voice raw. "I'm pregnant." Silence. A profound, suffocating silence fell over the kitchen. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, an ironic counterpoint to the frozen moment, and the soft, almost imperceptible wheels of Eleanor's shoes against the hardwood floor as she shifted. She said nothing, just stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, cold line. But something in her eyes, something like pure, unadulterated satisfaction, flickered. It was a fleeting, chilling glimpse into the depths of her manipulation. Ethan dropped the test as if it burned his fingers. He straightened up slowly and stepped back, away from me. I saw a raw fear flash across his face, not because he had hurt me, but because he didn't recognize himself anymore. He had become his mother's puppet, and in that horrifying moment the string had snapped, revealing the monster he'd allowed himself to become. Right then the front door burst open. It was Jessica, my neighbor from 2 houses down. A high school teacher, always kind, always thoughtful. She had once brought me banana bread during the holidays, just because. I don't know what she heard from outside. Perhaps the mug shattering, perhaps Ethan's shout. But her face froze when she saw the scene. My flushed, tear-stained cheek, my messy hair, me sitting crumpled on the kitchen floor, and the tiny pregnancy test lying like a bombshell between us. I heard a crash. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with alarm. Ethan took another step back, as if caught in a spotlight. Eleanor chimed in, calm as ever, her voice a practiced soothing tone. "Oh, Jessica dear, we're just having a small family misunderstanding. Nothing to worry about." Jessica ignored her completely. She walked straight to me, her eyes filled with immediate, non-judgmental compassion. She knelt down, her arm wrapping around my trembling shoulders. "Come with me, Sarah, right now." I looked at Ethan. He didn't say a word, didn't make a move to stop me, just stood there, motionless, a ghost of the man I once knew. I stood shaky, letting Jessica gently guide me out, away from the shattered glass, away from the cold satisfaction in Eleanor's eyes, away from the stranger in my husband's face. As the door closed behind us, I heard Eleanor murmur, probably to Ethan, her voice soft but triumphant. "See, I told you." My legs trembled, but my hand still rested protectively on my belly. My child, mine. And I knew, in that moment, with a fierce, unwavering certainty, that I wasn't just leaving a house. I was stepping out of an illusion. Jessica didn't ask a single question on the way to her apartment, a small, cozy unit on the 2nd floor of a red brick building down the street. She simply opened the door, flipped on a soft yellow light, and without a word, made me a mug of ginger tea. The soothing warmth permeated my chilled hands. She then pulled a thick, soft quilt over the couch, gesturing for me to sit. I sank onto the cushions, still holding my belly on reflex, my left cheek still warm and stinging, but the real pain was buried deep, in places no one could see. Jessica sat beside me, not speaking, just placing a warm, comforting hand on my shoulder. "Nothing empty or useless," she whispered, as if reading my mind. After a long moment of quiet, she simply said, "I'll call a doctor in the morning." The next day, true to her word, Jessica took me to an OB/GYN clinic less than 3 blocks away. It was quiet, deliberately so. The walls were painted a calming pastel blue. A vase of fresh baby's breath sat on the reception desk. Everything felt gentle, soft, like it was built to hold fragile hearts. When the doctor placed the probe on my belly and the screen lit up, a fuzzy, indistinct image at first, I held my breath. Then a tiny, rhythmic flutter appeared. A heartbeat, tiny, clear, strong. "You're about 6.5 weeks," the doctor said softly, her voice reassuring. "Everything looks stable, Sarah." I didn't respond with words. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. But there were no sobs. That moment, that little heartbeat, held me together like a fragile, unbreakable thread. Jessica, ever practical, turned to the doctor. "Would you mind recording that sound?" And the doctor nodded. That night, I sat alone in Jessica's living room. Porch light shadows drifted across the curtains, painting the room in shifting grays. I opened my messaging app, attached the audio file, and typed only 3 words. No blame, no anger, no desperate plea. Just a piece of undeniable truth sent to the man who once swore to protect me, who had instead broken me. "Your child's heartbeat." It was marked red within minutes. Then a new message appeared. "Please, meet me, just me, no mom, I swear." I stared at the screen, torn. Part of me wanted to block his number, erase every trace of him, every memory of the pain. But the part of me carrying this tiny, innocent child needed to know. Needed to know if he was still the man I once trusted, the man who dreamed of children's laughter filling our home. I typed slowly. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Maple and Sage Cafe." Then I added a single, non-negotiable condition, simple and stark. "If your mother shows up, I walk away forever." His reply came instantly. "I understand. I'll come alone. I promise." The next day, I sat at the window seat of the Maple and Sage Cafe, holding a warm cinnamon tea. My eyes were fixed on the cobblestone street outside, watching the world go by. Maple and Sage was where I used to read alone before Ethan had walked into my life and turned it upside down, then right side up, then upside down again. Maybe in some small way, I was hoping to meet that version of myself again, the Sarah before everything fell apart. At exactly 2 p.m., the door chimed softly. Ethan walked in alone, wearing a faded blue shirt, empty-handed, looking like he'd barely slept in days. He paused when he saw me, uncertain, fragile. "Can I sit?" he asked softly, his voice raw. I nodded, offering no greetings, just a quiet acknowledgement. He sat, keeping a careful distance, a strange, almost formal carefulness between 2 people who had once shared everything, their bodies intertwining in sleep, their thoughts melding seamlessly. "I know, there's no excuse for what I did, Sarah," Ethan began, his voice hoarse with unshed emotion. "I didn't see how far I'd drifted, how completely lost I was, until you disappeared. And then that sound, the heartbeat." He stopped, covering his face with a trembling hand, his shoulders shaking slightly. I didn't cry. I kept my voice even, controlled, though inside I felt like a fragile vase about to shatter. "I didn't come to hear you apologize, Ethan. I need to know one thing. Will my child be safe with you around?" Ethan looked up, his eyes bloodshot, desperate. "I swear, Sarah, I'll do whatever it takes. To prove it to you, you can set any conditions. I'll follow them." I sat up straight, pulling a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. "I already wrote them down," I said, placing it gently on the table between us. 3 conditions. If you break even one, Ethan, I won't look back. Not ever." He took the paper, his hands trembling slightly, and opened it, reading slowly, meticulously. When he reached the last one, his lips trembled, but he swallowed hard. "I agree, all 3, I'll prove it. Not with words, with action." I looked out the window, watching the dry maple branches shifting in the early winter breeze. My heartbeat, once erratic, began to steady. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of protecting myself, and the small, precious life growing inside me. Ethan sat there, gripping the paper I'd handed him as if letting go would make all hope vanish. I didn't rush to say anything else. not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed control over my own voice, my own narrative. He spoke first, his voice barely a whisper, filled with a raw, agonizing realization. She lied about everything. I kept my gaze on my tea, but my chest tightened, a familiar ache of dread. Right after you left, he continued, she called Aunt Carol, just as I was coming down the stairs. She didn't know I could hear her. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. She said you were dangerous, that you were using the baby to trap me, that you were seeing someone else. A bitter, ironic laugh escaped him. And then she laughed, Sarah, said she finally freed me. I looked up slowly, meeting his haunted gaze. And you believed it, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, until the test fell at your feet. Ethan dropped his eyes, saying nothing, but I didn't need the answer. His silence was deafening, a confirmation of how thoroughly he had been manipulated, how completely he had failed me. I pulled out a second sheet from my bag and placed it lightly on the table. These are the 3 conditions for us to even consider moving forward. No halfway, no negotiations. He opened it, his eyes scanning line by line. With each sentence, his posture sagged just a little more, the weight of his mother's deceit and his own complicity pressing down on him. 1. Eleanor is never allowed back in our lives. No visits, no information about the baby, nothing. 2. You attend weekly individual therapy, and we attend couples counseling. No delays, no empty promises. You commit fully. 3. If you ever lay a hand on me again, Ethan, even once, I will press charges, file for full custody, and you will never see me or our child again. He looked up, his face etched with a profound mix of remorse and fear. I agree. His voice was barely a whisper. I wasn't convinced. I'd heard easier promises before. Words I knew meant nothing without action. He pulled 2 business cards from his wallet, placing them neatly in front of me. One's a family attorney. She's already drafting the agreement for custody. If I violate Rule 3, you get full custody. No dispute. My signature's on it. All you need is yours. I went still, a jolt of surprise running through me. This was concrete. The second, he continued, pushing the other card forward, is a therapist. I had my first session yesterday, and this... He opened the calendar app on his phone, showing me an appointment. This is our first couples counseling appointment. Tomorrow, you can call to confirm if you want. I inhaled deeply, studying him, studying myself. You're doing all this for me, Ethan? No, he said, shaking his head, his eyes meeting mine, raw and honest. For the baby, for myself, and because you gave me one last chance, Sarah, even when I didn't deserve it. I looked outside at the dry maple branches shifting in the early winter breeze. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone again, not fully. But I knew this. The child growing inside me deserved a father who wasn't controlled, manipulated, or a shadow of Eleanor. I'm not coming home, I said softly, laying down another boundary, a crucial one. We'll start again, but not under the same roof, not yet. Ethan nodded, no argument. As long as you don't feel safe, Sarah, I won't come close. I'll respect your space. He stood, about to leave, but then he paused. He pulled a small slip of paper from his shirt pocket, unfolding it carefully. One last thing, he said, his voice hesitant. He set the paper in front of me. I looked down. A single handwritten line, neat and steady, echoing the words he whispered at our wedding. I chose you, and I'll choose you again, every day, if you'll let me. I folded the note, slid it into my pocket. I didn't say a word, but I didn't push it back either. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was just a door. Open, just wide enough for a sliver of light to come in. After months of darkness, after that meeting, a fragile truce settled between us. Ethan upheld his end of the bargain. He moved into a small apartment across town, ensuring I had the space and peace I needed. He started individual therapy, diligently, and showed up for every single couples counseling session with Dr. Emily Stone, our marriage counselor. Our conversations there were often difficult, raw, but essential. He began to truly unravel the years of Eleanor's insidious control, seeing the patterns, the gaslighting, the emotional manipulation that had warped his perception of reality for so long. For my part, I was still guarded, cautious, but I observed him, looking for consistency, for genuine change, not just words. Life, even in this precarious new balance, started to find a rhythm. I continued writing in my journal for Chloe, tracing the quiet, hopeful lines each morning. I'd have coffee with Jessica on the porch of her apartment, sharing the small victories and lingering anxieties. The library became my sanctuary again, its familiar quiet a soothing balm, but the shadow of Eleanor, though unseen, still lingered. Months passed. My belly grew larger each day, a testament to the new life flourishing within me. And then, the familiar silver SUV started appearing. First, it was parked across from the library every Tuesday morning. At first, I wasn't sure. Could have been coincidence, but then it showed up again on Wednesday and Friday, always in the same spot, same hour, engine running, window slightly cracked. Like someone was watching but didn't want to be seen. It was a cold, calculated presence, a silent threat. The fourth time, I stopped halfway up the library steps, a deep, unsettling certainty settling in my gut. I stared directly at the vehicle. Through the dark, tinted window, I clearly saw Eleanor's face behind her sunglasses, unflinching, cold. My fingers trembled as I pulled out my phone. Me, your mom is parked outside the library, 3 days in a row. Ethan's reply came minutes later. Ethan, I'll call the police. Stay inside. I stood behind the glass entrance, watching from a distance, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. 17 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Eleanor stepped out of her car, her posture oddly theatrical, as if she were strolling through a park, her face feigning concern, a carefully constructed mask. I heard her voice rise, carrying even through the closed glass. I'm just worried about my son. He's being isolated. He's not himself anymore. His wife is hiding something. The officers blocked her path, saying something I couldn't quite hear, their voices firm but professional. Eleanor suddenly changed her tone. Her hands began to shake. Her voice cracked dramatically, like she was on stage, delivering a soliloquy for an unseen audience. I just want to see my grandchild. I haven't done anything wrong. At that moment, Jessica, my rock, my unwavering support, was standing beside me in the library, holding a stack of books for the children's section. She pulled out her phone. Want proof for a restraining order? She whispered. I nodded, a fierce determination hardening my gaze. She recorded the entire scene. Eleanor's sudden dramatic shift in tone, the performance, her theatrical outburst as she was asked to leave. My son's been brainwashed. That baby is a trap. It's not even his. My fists clenched. I'd had enough. This was no longer just about me. This was about my child. At our couples therapy session the following week, I handed the phone to Dr. Emily Stone, our marriage counselor, and placed it silently on the table. Ethan sat beside me, silent, his gaze fixed on the device. No one spoke as his mother's voice filled the quiet room, sweet, then venomous, then shrieking with manufactured rage. All in under a minute. I looked over at Ethan. His face had gone pale, almost ashen. One hand covered his forehead. The other gripped the armrest of the chair, his knuckles white. His eyes locked on the screen, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, or perhaps what he was finally allowing himself to see. I didn't edit anything, Ethan, I said softly, my voice devoid of accusation, just stating a fact. Ethan nodded slowly, then exhaled like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. It was her, he muttered, his voice barely audible, haunted. Exactly like when my dad left. I turned to look at him, truly look at him, for the first time in months. Ethan opened up, his voice cracking with a pain that felt generations deep. Dad left when I was 17. Back then, Mom screamed for a whole week, broke things, called the entire family together to accuse him of cheating, of abandoning us. He paused, a painful memory unfolding in his eyes. But later, I overheard her talking to Aunt Carol, sounding just like in that video, laughing, saying, finally got rid of him. He was holding me back. Ethan looked at me, raw guilt flooding his eyes. I grew up between 2 versions of the same person, Sarah, and I chose to believe the performance instead of the truth right in front of me. Dr. Stone nodded, her voice steady and calm, radiating empathy. Emotional manipulation, especially from a parent, is incredibly hard to recognize when it's all you've ever known, Ethan. It's your normal. But Ethan, every time you choose Sarah over that control, every time you see through the performance, you're breaking the cycle. You're choosing your own truth. Ethan turned to me, and for the first time, his eyes weren't guarded. They were open, vulnerable, and resolute. "I know I don't deserve it, Sarah," he said, his voice firm, "but I won't let her hurt you, or the baby, ever again. I've already contacted a lawyer. They're preparing the paperwork for a permanent protective order." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. It wasn't total relief, not yet, but it was something. A sliver of ease, knowing I wasn't the only one who saw Eleanor for who she truly was. At the end of the session, Ethan gently held my hand. Not tight, not demanding, just a quiet signal. "I'm learning, and I won't leave you alone anymore." I entered the 7th month of pregnancy with both awareness and profound caution. Even as my belly grew larger each day, a testament to the new life, I couldn't let my guard down. Not with the shadow of Eleanor lingering, a constant, chilling presence just out of sight. After that therapy session, Ethan suggested we put together a detailed, comprehensive plan to protect me and the baby. No more vague promises, no more "I'll handle it." Only real, concrete steps. We changed my delivery hospital to a different facility over 30 minutes away from our previous home. The new hospital had a private security protocol for high-risk maternity cases, a discreet but robust system. My medical records were encrypted under a false name, a code known only to 3 people: me, my OB/GYN, and Ethan. My official emergency contact was Jessica, the one person I had trusted implicitly from the very beginning. Ethan no longer stayed with me at Jessica's apartment, respecting my need for space and emotional distance. But he showed up without fail at every ultrasound appointment, every prenatal visit, always bringing new layers of security, detailed camera layouts for the building, shift schedules for the security team, a list of new door codes for the apartment complex. He was relentless, methodical, utterly dedicated. One Monday afternoon, as I was folding newborn clothes in the quiet bedroom of Jessica's apartment, a task filled with a bittersweet mix of anticipation and anxiety, the doorbell rang. Jessica went to answer it, her brow furrowed slightly. She came back a moment later, holding a beige box tied with a pristine black ribbon. No sender, no return address. My stomach churned, a heavy stone dropping inside my chest. This felt wrong. Jessica, sensing my apprehension, carefully opened it, peeling back the tissue paper. Inside was a pale gray stuffed animal, an unfamiliar shape, neither rabbit nor bear, with dark, sunken eyes stitched in rough, unsettling red thread. At the bottom of the box, a small card, handwritten in brownish-red ink, a chilling mockery of a loving message. "She'll need someone who knows how to raise her. Blood is still blood, Sarah." I didn't scream. I didn't throw it. I just stared at the words, the red ink seeming to pulse with a malevolent energy, until the letters blurred from tears I refused to let fall. This wasn't just a threat. It was a violation, a twisted message of ownership. Ethan arrived less than 20 minutes later, still in his work shirt, out of breath from running up 3 flights of stairs. He looked at the stuffed animal, his face grim, saying nothing. He pulled out his phone, took a precise photo, then carefully sealed the disturbing toy and card in a Ziploc bag. "I'm taking this to the lawyer's office," he said, his voice low, his eyes filled not with anger, but with solid, unwavering resolve. "We'll add it to the permanent protective order file. We won't let her cross any more lines, Sarah. Not one." We upgraded the apartment's indoor and outdoor security cameras, changed every access code, set up an emergency signal between me and Jessica. 3 missed calls in a row would mean immediate danger. Ethan also added his friend, Officer Ben Thompson, a local police officer, to our emergency support list. During a follow-up session with Dr. Stone, she asked, "Do you feel safer now, Sarah?" I replied honestly, not completely, but at least I know who's standing with me. Ethan sat beside me, a silent, steady presence. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak for me. He simply placed his hand on the table, close but not touching, respectful. That's how he was relearning love, with space, with patience, with unwavering action. The following week, I got a call from the hospital's administrative office. Someone had been repeatedly contacting them, claiming to be the patient's biological mother, saying I was suffering from pregnancy depression and needed special oversight. I didn't need to guess who it was: Eleanor. When Ethan found out, he immediately had my records moved to a higher security department. He requested the hospital revise all verification protocols for my file, and crucially, registered me under Jessica's address instead of the old one. "Every trace will be erased, Sarah," he said, his voice firm, his jaw set. "She has no rights over you or the baby anymore. Absolutely none." I nodded silently, a knot of gratitude and relief loosening in my chest. Inside, I knew. Ethan was truly fighting now. He was no longer the man who used to stay quiet, complicit, behind Eleanor's back. He was the man who promised to choose me, every single day. That night, he sat beside me in Chloe's nursery. We had just finished. Mint green walls with white trim, illustrations of forests, owls, and spotted deer hanging neatly across the room. It was a space filled with quiet hope, a stark contrast to the chaos we had navigated. I looked at him and said softly, "If there's one thing I fear the most, Ethan, it's not her. It's our child growing up in fear." "Growing up like you did," Ethan replied without hesitation, his voice strong and clear, mirroring my deepest desire. "Our child will grow up knowing that their parents did everything they could to break that cycle, starting now." I went into labor at 3:12 a.m. on a quiet March morning. No thunder, no heavy rain, just a dull, persistent contraction pulling me out of a restless sleep. I sat up, hands on my belly, feeling each tightening like a stark reminder. It was time. Ethan arrived the moment he got Jessica's frantic message. The hospital bag had been packed for weeks, the car tank full, every step of the plan double-checked, triple-checked. He didn't ask too many questions, just said, "I'm here, let's go." Jessica came with us, sitting in the back seat, her eyes locked on her phone, maintaining contact with the hospital and Mark, her husband, a local police officer assigned to oversee my personal security throughout labor and delivery. When we reached Mercy Oaks Hospital, I was taken straight to the high-security maternity ward. Every entry point was fingerprint controlled. My patient ID wasn't under my real name, but an encrypted code known only to my OB, attending nurses, and one senior security officer. Ethan was issued a temporary guest badge with limited hours, while Jessica waited outside with Mark, who stood silently in front of the delivery room door, radio in hand, his gaze never leaving the hallway. Inside the softly lit room that smelled faintly of peppermint oil, I lay on a high hospital bed, listening to the steady, comforting beep of the fetal monitor. Dr. Linda Miller, my OB, entered with a warm, reassuring smile. "Sarah, today's the big day. Everything is ready." I nodded, squeezing Ethan's slightly trembling hand. He looked at me, no longer afraid, just intensely focused on grounding me through each increasingly intense wave of pain. The contractions came like crashing waves, each one tearing down the layers of strength I had tried so hard to hold together. I thought I could deliver in silence, with composure, but in the end, I couldn't hide the shaking, the creeping panic that threatened to overwhelm me. Ethan never left my side. He didn't say much, just whispered when I gasped for air. His voice a steady anchor. "You're doing so well, Sarah. You're not alone. I'm right here." At 11:17 a.m., under the bright delivery lights and the nurse's rhythmic counting, a small piercing cry filled the room. I collapsed back onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably at the raw, vibrant sound of that first cry. A scream of life, raw and entirely belonging to my daughter. "A healthy baby girl," the doctor announced, her voice cheerful. 6 pounds, 13 ounces, strong lungs, pink skin. "What's her name?" Ethan looked at me, his eyes shining with tears. I nodded, my voice choked with emotion. "Chloe, her name is Chloe Grace Jensen." The nurse brought her over and placed her on my chest. Chloe opened her eyes, blurred, soaked, and my entire world shrank into those tiny pupils. Everything else faded. That afternoon, while I rested, a hospital staff member brought in a bouquet of white roses, tied with a purple ribbon and a small card. My blood ran cold at the sight of it. The card read, "For the granddaughter who will one day need to know the truth. Eleanor." Even now, she could not resist a final chilling manipulation. Jessica immediately snapped a photo and called for Mark, who was just outside. He said nothing, his face grim, just nodded and placed the bouquet into a numbered evidence bag. Ethan walked in just as Mark was walking out. He saw my face, then the photo on Jessica's phone. He didn't wait a second. "I'm taking this to the attorney tonight, Sarah," he stated, his voice firm, without a trace of the hesitancy he once harbored. "She's violated the no-contact terms of the protective order. There will be consequences this time. Legal consequences. I didn't stop him. I trusted him. That night, Mark stayed at the hospital. He sat outside my room the entire night, a steady, reassuring presence. No strangers appeared. No sign of Eleanor. But our guards stayed up, not from fear, not anymore, but because we had learned one crucial thing. Peace must be fiercely protected. Ethan cradled Chloe in his arms while she slept, a sight that still brought tears to my eyes. He was no longer the man who once stood silent as I crumbled. Now he sat beneath the soft golden light of the nursery lamp, whispering little stories into our daughter's ear, as if weaving a new version of himself into existence. I returned home with Chloe on a sunny morning, the first consistent sunshine after weeks of damp April rain. Ethan opened the door gently, like even the smallest noise might wake the baby. And the moment I stepped inside, I knew everything had changed. The sharp, overwhelming lavender oils Eleanor once insisted on were gone. So was the family photo above the dining table that read, in ornate script, "Blood is family," the one she had demanded we keep prominently displayed. No more crystal jars of peppermint candy quietly watching from the bookshelf. Instead, warmth filled the space. The living room had been repainted a soft, calming gray, a stark yet beautiful contrast to the bright colors it once held. One corner had been transformed into a cozy nook for Chloe, a comfortable rocking chair, plush rugs, and a basket of tiny, colorful toys. The bedroom had new linens, soft and inviting. Even the summer blankets were folded exactly the way I liked, not the rigid military square fold Eleanor used to impose. Ethan didn't say a word about the changes. He simply helped me hold Chloe, kissed her forehead, and gently laid her in the new bassinet by the window. Light filtered through the white curtains, making my eyes blur. Not from exhaustion, not from fear, but from a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. Those first few days were, predictably, full of challenges. Sleepless nights, 2 a.m. diaper changes, sudden cries that jolted us up like soldiers on alert. But Ethan never missed a beat. He learned how to swaddle with surprising dexterity, how to hold her tiny, fragile head without bending her neck, how to soothe her with a quiet, off-key song, one he chuckled at himself for getting the lyrics wrong. One night, I woke up to make a bottle and saw the kitchen light already on. He was there, in an old t-shirt, gently shaking the formula bottle, his eyes still heavy with sleep. When he saw me, he whispered, "Go rest a little more, Sarah. I just changed her." I didn't step forward. I just stood there, watching him, my heart swelling with a quiet, profound emotion. The man who once broke me was now stitching things back together, quietly, consistently, one small act of devotion at a time. 2 weeks later, we went grocery shopping together for the first time since Chloe's birth. A calm Sunday morning, Chloe slept soundly in her stroller, nestled safely in her car seat. I pushed the cart, and Ethan picked out milk, detergent, and whole wheat bread, moving with a practiced ease, as if he had memorized my shopping list. I was picking out fruit, a moment of mundane normalcy, when Ethan suddenly froze, his eyes locking in place at the far end of the aisle. My heart tightened, a cold premonition washing over me. I turned. Eleanor. She stood at the far end of the aisle, holding a bunch of arugula, her eyes locked on Chloe in the stroller. Her gaze wasn't fierce or angry. It was calculated, persistent, like a predator tracking its prey. I moved closer to Ethan instinctively, but he had already turned his back, positioning himself between us and his mother. "Let's go," he said quietly, his voice firm, decisive. "Ethan?" Her voice rang out, sharper than necessary, cutting through the ambient hum of the supermarket. "Are you really going to keep me from seeing my grandchild? Your own mother?" He didn't turn, didn't say a word. "You'll regret this, Ethan. I raised you. I have the right." Ethan walked straight to the customer service desk, his pace unwavering. I followed, one hand resting protectively on Chloe's stroller. He said something quietly to the staff, pointing discreetly in Eleanor's direction. They nodded immediately, picked up the phone, and called security. I didn't need to hear it to know what he said. It was all pre-planned. Eleanor was escorted out, her protest fading into the background noise. I saw her glance back, eyes wild, lips still moving in a silent, furious tirade. But this time, no one was listening. Ethan turned back, looked at me, then at Chloe, and said gently, "This isn't running anymore, Sarah. It's setting boundaries. Firm ones." That night, while I was putting Chloe to sleep in her newly decorated room, Ethan quietly walked into the kitchen and poured me a glass of orange juice, just like he used to when I was still pregnant, when things were simple. He set it on the table, then sat down beside me, his gaze fixed on our daughter breathing peacefully next to us. "I know redemption isn't something you prove with words, Sarah," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "But I won't stop trying, every single day." I didn't answer with words. Instead, I placed my hand over his, a silent affirmation, a renewed trust. We didn't go back to where we started. We had come too far for that. The old life, the old house, the old versions of ourselves, they were gone, fractured by betrayal and manipulation. But in this renewed home, a space free from the scent of control, free from the shadows of cold words and insidious whispers, we began again. Not to forget, but to keep living, for Chloe, for us, and for the things truly worth protecting. My story isn't about revenge, not in the way you might think. It's not about winning a battle against someone else. It's about learning how to rise when you've been pushed to your absolute edge. It's about recognizing that some people you believe are your safe place end up being the ones who lead you astray, who steal your very sense of self. I've learned that in order to protect my child, I must first protect myself, with clear boundaries, with conscious, unwavering choices, and with the fierce belief that I deserve a life of peace, free from manipulation and fear. And Chloe, my sweet, strong Chloe, she is the reason I chose to begin again. What do you think about my journey? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand to protect yourself or your loved ones from someone who felt entitled to control your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional stories about family, love, and the incredible strength we find when we choose ourselves.